Hello everyone, welcome to this demo on how to start using type in Photoshop. I have three different labs I think that we're going to cover first using type, and then I have other ones that we're going to do later on. These ones that we're going to do are pretty basic. They're just an introduction of what type looks like in Photoshop and the different options that you have. So the first lab that we're going to do, this one that you see on the screen right now, is basically taking type and we're going to apply some filters on it to give the illusion that it's being vibrating or something like that. So we have this image of a mouse with the mouth open, kind of like if it's screaming or something like that. And we have this word right here that we created some motion on it through the filters panel. Okay, so I'm going to start from scratch. So follow along and then later look at the video again for the details on how to do it. But first, just enjoy and watch the video. I'm going to first start by throwing this to the trash so we can start from scratch. And the type tool to get it in Photoshop is just to press the letter T, okay, for Tom. And you can see this symbol here that it looks like a letter T, right, on the toolbar near the bottom. Okay, now if you, similar than the other tools, if you have a little triangle, you remember that you have more options. So if I hold it down, you have the vertical type tool and the horizontal type tool. So we're going to use the horizontal type tool for now. And with this, you know, we have the habit of just duplicating the background by doing Command J. So I'm going to do that, but it doesn't really type on top of your image. So if you go ahead and just click there, it will put this placeholder for now, highlight. As soon as you start typing, it's going to write over that. But I just want to point out how the layers work with the type. So you can see that we had the background and we did the copy. And as soon as we click, it added a type layer. And you can see that this is different than the other ones. These ones have like a little thumbnail of the image. These ones have a T, right? And it has this like brackets around it. And this is to let you know that it's a vector-based layer, which that means is that you can stretch or shrink this layer in how many ways you want, and it's not going to distort the pixels because it's actually being rasterized each time, and it's basically a vector image, which means that it's not made by pixels. It actually makes the pixels every time you stretch it or recalculate and then redo the image to give you this preview that you see here. So basically, it's not applied until later when you're going to export it. So this is really good. What, you know, the bottom line of what you need to understand is that we talked about before. If you make an image really small and then you stretch it in Photoshop, it's not the same, right? Because you're making up information from going down to upscaling. In this case, it doesn't work like that. It actually maintains the resolution. And just to showcase, I'm going to write the word blah, okay, and I'm going to change the color. I'm going to show you the resolution in a little bit, but I want to right away deal with this type and how I want it. And similar to, you know, Word or Google Docs, you basically can highlight the type and you can change the color up here. If I go right here, I can move this, you know, slider up to get the red color. But as soon as you have this window open, you can basically go to the image. You can see that I'm going over here and you can get the red from the image itself. And that's what I did on the demo. I'm just going to click here because I thought this is a cool red. I'm just going to use that red for the type. I'm going to press OK. Now, after I do that, you will see that right here in the top, you have how many points, right? So you can make it, let's say 72. Okay. And we have Helvetica bold. That's fine. I'm going to approve it. Now, if you notice, when I went here, right, 72 was the biggest that will allow me. You can actually write down the amount that you want here. Let's say if I want 100. Okay. Oh, and I'm going to hit return. And then it will make it that way. Another way that you could do it is, since I just told you that you can stretch this, you can do Command T and then grab the corners. Okay, and you can stretch it. Now, because this is not a bitmap image and it's a vector base, you can actually stretch it as big as you want and it will still maintain the proportion. You can see that it doesn't get pixelated, right? You can see how sharp those lines are. They don't get pixelated. If you would have done this with an image, you right away would see all the pixel, across the image. But here you can tell that stays really sharp, which is good. So you can feel free to just like stretch it and get it to the right size, the right location. Let's say I want it there. Let's make it a little smaller here. And to approve the type, similar to the transform, it's on the transform. You can go here to the checkbox or hit return. And that's the first thing that you're going to do. You're going to change the color, okay? And if you want to reactivate the type, if you double click on the T here, it right away will select it. And then you can go here again and then change the color if you want. And you can also go here and change the font to whatever you want, okay? So that works pretty easy. You also have a window if you go to window, and there is a couple of options that you have here. You have paragraph if you're dealing with paragraph. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up, and you have also characters right here. So you can, it's the same thing changing the settings here or going up here. You do have a little bit more options here on this window. Okay, so for example, the separation between the letters, you can make them be closer or further away, like this one. If you don't know what you want, just leave it at 0. Okay, you don't want to be playing with the kerning if you don't need to. That's one thing that you have there, but you can see that you have a lot of options. And paragraph too, if you want to justify it to the left or to the right, or justify the entire paragraph. Now, this is basically what we did here, is just click with the type tool. You have another option of, I'm going to select the type tool. You can click and drag, and you can make a box, right? A type box that you can type, and the type will be inside that box. We're not going to do that right now, but I just want to point it out because you have options. Okay, so now that we did this layer that says blah, if you go to filter here, we can blur it out and create this motion. There are two ways that you can do it, and it will give me a message right now if I go to blur and I'm go to let's do motion blur. Because it's not a bitmap, it's going to ask you like, this type layer must be rasterized or converted to a smart object before proceeding. Okay, the type will no longer be editable. So what that means is that to apply a filter, it needs to rasterize that type. And what rasterize means is converting it from a vector to a bitmap. Okay, so basically like an image. So it's really important that you get the scale and the size that you want correct. Now, another thing that I do usually, I'm going to hit cancel so I can show you what I do, is I have this blah, and I first do Command J, right? And I hide the original one, and now I rasterize this one, because if I do something by mistake, I just want to change the color, something like, I don't want to retype it, resize it, and all that, I already have to back up right here. So now I'm going to go to filter, blur, motion blur, and now when it asks me that, I'm going to say, rasterize it. I'm going to rasterize it. You can convert it to a smart object, but it takes more memory, because basically it's doing what I just did here in a way of keeping the background, one as a backup. We're going to deal with smart objects later, so that's why I'm not going into it right now. But in this case, what we did is, you can see that that type, the T, went away, and now it's like a little, thumbnail. So it's basically like an image. So now it's no longer editable that if I want to change the color or something like that. But it gives me the option of blurring it. So I can get like the blur like that and press OK. So it's pretty easy. So that's the first thing I want you to learn with this lab, is that idea of going from vector to bitmap in case you need that. Because later on you're going to see that there's some cool things that you can do with type that it cannot be applied to a normal vector type. So that's the first lab that you're going to do. You're going to basically create the type, and you're going to rasterize it to add the motion like this. Now, if you want to do the other way, where let me show you how that looks, of going to the filter and then blur and motion blur, just so I can show you right now what a smart object looks like. You basically can apply that, And you will see that here on the layers, it has this little icon now at the bottom right. And that's what basically is telling you that it's a smart object. And what that does is gives you the capability of double clicking here and readjusting it. Okay, if you realize that you did too much or too little, it works great. The only drawback of using smart objects is that it makes your file size way bigger. Okay, in the workflow that I use smart objects, but I try to minimize them, because if you end up with a bunch of layers, like have 20 layers with smart object, it's going to make your file size huge. So I try to really limit it to when I really need it. In this case, I thought it was easy. It's just blurring it, so I thought it wasn't necessary. So that's why I didn't do it. But it gives you some advantages, because even if I apply this, if I later realize, oh, that's actually too much, I can double click here and then I can readjust it. If you would have done it by rasterizing, you would have to go back to the original one and redo it. Okay. So it's just a matter of workflow. If you don't mind about file size and you have a huge hard drive, then, if you do one image, it's not going to be a problem. The problem is when you have like 50, 100, 200, 500 images that are big, it's just going to create a mess in your hard drive. It's going to be too big. So I teach you also that workflow also means that how do you work within your files will make smaller file size, so that way it doesn't clog up your whole system. Okay. So that's a little bit of lecture there about file size, but I always like to talk about that because, that's the problem that I deal with, that I'm always like having hard drives all over, every computer, different hard drives for my laptop. It's just messy. Even if you try to be organized, you're going to end up with a lot of devices. So that's basically this lab. I'm going to show you the next one, and it's very similar. It's this one right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to basically create this transformation, so that way it looks like it has like the shape of the mouth going out, and it's really easy to do. Okay, so I'm going to delete this so you can see how it's done. I already have the type layer. I'm kind of cheating here because I want to save some time on the video. So I typed the word. You already know how to do that. I basically select the T tool or click on the type tool, click on the image, and then change the color and all that. Now the cool thing about this one is that I want to transform it, right, and scale it in perspective. So I do Command T, and if I right click inside of this, you can scale it, rotate, skew, wrap. So let's try skew so you can see what happens. Skew goes like that and like that. So it doesn't really distort it how I want. Okay, so that didn't quite work. The reason is because it's a vector. So if you notice, when I did Command T, and I right click inside, there's a lot of options here that like distort that are not available because it's not rasterized. So let me show you how you're going to rasterize it beforehand. So you type your layer, you have it as a vector. You're going to go here to layer, and you're going to go down to where it says rasterize, and then you're just going to say type. Okay, so this one right here. So layer, rasterize, type. I'm going to click on it. And now you can see right here on my layers that it's no longer a type. Now if I do Command T and I right click inside of it, now I have more options like distort and perspective. So if I click up, for example, on perspective, and I click on the corner and then pull out, then it's going to give me that stretchy feel. And it's fine if it distorts it a little bit and it gets a little bit pixelated, because that's part of the effect, right? You're just really distorting the image. So I think that's fine. It looks a little bit pixelated, but when I approve it, you'll see that it will look fine. It looks a little bit soft, but here it's pretty sharp because it didn't stretch it too much. But that kind of gives the idea of motion too, so I don't mind it that much. So that one is how you're going to do this one right here. It's pretty easily. Remember, you just have to do Command T, but before you do the Command T, you have to make sure that you go to Layer and then rasterize your image. Okay, so that's that one. So we have two labs right here. This one is giving motion. This one is going to be scaling it. And then this one that we're going to do now, we have two that we're going to do is dealing with the pen tool. Okay, and I know that some of you have this fear of the pen tool because it takes a little bit of learning curve to get a hang of it. But I'm going to show you that it's really easy to do. And what I did here is I type onto the path. So basically I did a path that looks like a little wavy, okay? And then you can type and then the type will follow that path, which is really useful because when you're doing creative design, you want to like sometimes, create an image like this that it feels like you're going up and then you're going down, and you can actually play with the design and what the type is saying within your design, okay? So I'm gonna cheat a little bit. Let me copy this so I don't have to rewrite it. And if I go and delete this, I already have my path also, so I'm going to cheat a little bit. I have this path right here that I just did, right? It's like a little curvy thing. I can do a new one just so you can get the idea. I'm going to select my pen tool, okay? And just remember that you have to be on path. You can be actually on shape too, but we're going to talk about that later. And you go like this, right? You make a little wavy thing and then you go down. And one thing I did on this one, I went around to close it. Okay. Oh, I didn't close it. There we go. And now if I select my type tool, okay, now I can click here. You can see that. Let me do it a little bit higher so you can see it. The type tool by default is like a little box, okay, like with the little dots. And if I go over the line, then it goes to a wavy kind of like S. So once you see that, that means that, if you click here, it's going to be a type on the path. So I'm going to click. And once I click, it's going to add my placeholder, right, type. And I'm going to do Command V to paste the one that I had. Now, because I click here, it's starting the type from here. So you have to be aware that when you click, right, it has to be that location where you want to be. You can also like pull it if you're, let me approve that. If you're here and you want to like play along, the cool thing about the path is even after it's done, you can like literally like play with it, right? So you can remodify the path and adjust it to what you want to do. But that's something that's pretty cool. And there's this little symbol here that sometimes it's kind of hard. Let's see if I can zoom in to see it. There's this little symbol that will appear on the beginning part of your type. And you can actually move where the beginning part is going to start. Sometimes it goes kind of crazy on you. So you have to be really careful on how you play with this, because sometimes it just becomes messy. And also if you flip it, it can flip your type. And what I'm doing right now, I'm holding Command so I can get this move tool, and I click on this dot and I pull it up, and then it goes up. But you see now it's kind of creating a mess right here. Let's do it up. Oh, it doesn't want to go up. Okay, there we go. So it's a little bit, I wish it was a little bit more straightforward, but you can play with this. And you can also move the location. You can see that I'm dragging it back by holding Command and clicking on it and then pulling it back. There are two dots. This is one dot. So you want to move this one first and then pull this line right here. So that way you can move it back. I think there was an easier shortcut. I have to remember that one and tell you later. So that way you can like pull it back and forward. Right now, you see if I pull the wrong one, it goes over this dot and then it doesn't work. So you have to pull the dot first and then this one, and then it works. So let's zoom out. You can see it. So I think to prevent that headache, just make sure that you click where you're going to do it, because if not, you're going to have to be moving this, and then moving that until you get it to the right place. And it's a little bit annoying sometimes. So that's basically to type on the path. It's pretty easy to do. You can basically edit the type in the same way. You can do Command A and then change the color if you want. Let's say, do you want it blue? And then approve that. Okay. So now this line is visible, but remember, this is a path, so it won't print. If you want to disable the view, you go to the path panel right here. And if you click on the gray area, it will just go away. Okay. Basically, you're deactivating it. And then you can go to the layers and keep working here. And every time you click on your type, it will come back. But if you click on the gray area, it will just go away if you just want to see how it looks. But that line is just there as a preview so you can see it. And remember, every time you see that line, if you hold, command and you get the move tool, you can click on the dots and you can remove them, if you want to like change how the type is on that path. Okay, so that's that one right there. It's pretty easy. Now let's look at the last one. The last one is to type inside a path, or it could be a shape, for example. In this case, it's basically a letter T. I'm going to do a simpler one and do a circle just to, but what I did here is I type a T, okay, and then I change it into a path so I could type inside of it. But to make it simpler, so we don't have, you're not here forever, I'm just going to go here and select the ellipse tool, and I'm going to put, let's say, a color green, and I'm actually not going to do any stroke, and I'm going to create a circle, or let's do an oval, something like that. Okay, now here you can see that I have a shape, okay, because I had shape right there selected on the top. I have a fill color, no stroke, so I did the green shape, and this is actually a vector base, so it means that it's also vector, which is really cool because now I can like do Command T and stretch it if I want. Say I want it like that. And now that I have that, I can select my type tool, and you have to be careful because we already covered that if you do it on the line, you'll see like an S, right? So if I do it here, you see it does it around it. And that's cool, right? If that's what you want, but that's not what we want right now because we already did that. So what you want to do is do it inside. Inside it does like a circle around the T or the type tool. Okay, so outside is a box, on the line is an S, and inside is a circle. So if I click here, it's going to put my type inside. And now this is the part that's really cool if you have the paragraph open. So if I click here for the character and I go to paragraph, I can put it centered. Okay, so it's centered, or you can do it justified. I'm going to do it centered. And do I have something that I can paste here? Well, I think it's better if we just leave this. Just so you can get an idea on how that looks. Basically, it's the type inside. Now, the cool thing about this is now if I move, this, that can stay like that. So you can use it as a reference if you want to create a shape of a type. Okay, now it's independent of that. Okay, and you can move it around. So I don't know, it's something cool that you can play with if you want to look like it's floating outside of it or something like that. So that is to type inside a path. So for this one, I want you to create a path. You can do a custom one, and I want you to do a custom one because obviously you're going to do something harder than what I'm doing right now. So let me delete these two. And what you're going to do is you're going to select your pen tool because I want you to start practicing how to do a shape. And once you get the pen tool, you're going to change it to shape all the way here on the top. Remember, shape and path. We're going to do a shape, and you're going to do the fill with whatever color you want. And you're going to do any type of shape that you want. You can do like a crazy, star, whatever you want. Something that will, be kind of cool to type inside. I'm going to close mine. So if I do that, now if I select my type tool and click inside, then you can see that it does this weird type inside of it, which can be kind of fun. So I want you to try to do something, interesting like that. And you have to also be mindful. You have to be mindful that you should, when you're doing your shape, that you can actually fit the type inside, right? If you do something too crazy, like, this one is very crazy, it's too big to font, so it doesn't quite align there well. So you might have to, lower, the type so it's smaller, so it fits inside of it. So it looks a little bit nicer. This one is too crazy to shape, but I just did it for the fun of it. You probably want something more traditional, like a rectangle or a square or a circle, or you can do a triangle. But this one, because it has so many pointy, narrow areas, it does the type kind of weird. But I'm just looking at for the visual aspect. Okay, so that's what you need to do for this one. So we have 4 labs so far. We have this one where you're going to do the motion. Okay, this one where you have to rasterize it and scale it with distort or perspective. Then we have this one to type on the path, and then we have this one that we're going to type inside the path. Okay, so this is just an introduction of type and what you can do with it. Now, I'm very superficially touching it. You can also go in here and see some of the options that you have, like bold, all the traditional, word editing things that you have on characters. And you can see on the top right here that you also have the points, and you have also the color, and you have, things that we haven't covered, but you can also wrap text and make it like, in weird shapes and things like that. So we're kind of like superficially introducing the type, but for the assignment that you're going to do, you're going to definitely need to incorporate some type, and I am expecting you guys to do something creative with the type that goes with your design. So that's why we're starting to introduce how to use type in combination with shapes and path and things like that. Okay, so I hope that you have some fun with this one, and I'm going to post some other labs so you can learn some more stuff. Well, thank you very much, and have any questions, just let me know.